The midsize three-row crossover segment has been one of the hottest in the past couple years, with new entries in the Hyundai Palisade and Kia Telluride, plus refreshed models in the Ford Explorer and Toyota Highlander.
But it was just 2 years ago that these two models, the Volkswagen Atlas and the Subaru Ascent, hit the market brand new themselves. We decided to revisit these two models and see how they hold up against their new competition.
All right, let's get in and see how they drive.
So, Jonathan, I'm starting things off here in the Subaru Ascent, and this is the limited trim with captain's chairs, just one tick down from the top of the line, the Premier, and it comes out at just a little under $50,000, $48,500 and change.
Yeah, the Volkswagen Atlas we have here is the exec line trim, so it's top of the line, and it's got a price to match. It's over $55,000, so for that price, you do get a lot of features. And one of the things I find kind of luxurious is the fact that it has a V6. A lot of vehicles are moving over to the 2.5 liter 4-cylinder turbocharged. This V6 is 3.6 liters and it delivers 276 horsepower and 266 pound-feet of torque. And it is a nice, smooth powertrain with plenty of torque across the rev range.
Yeah, and speaking of smaller engines, you'll find that here in the Ascent with a 4-cylinder boxer arrangement on those cylinders, 2.4 liter displacement. But the power numbers they pretty well keep up. We've got 260 horsepower and 277 pound-feet of torque in this. And thanks to that turbocharging, it's available at a nice low 2,000 RPM. So it's not, as beefy maybe in drive feel as that V6, but it certainly gives an amount of power that you need. The CVT is nice and smooth, maybe a little spinny at highway speeds, but for the most part, no complaints about it here, and certainly a smoother power delivery than on that Atlas.
Yeah, that is the one thing about the Atlas that I don't particularly love. Sometimes when you're just sitting at a light turns green and you press the throttle a bit and suddenly it just jumps off the line, and it's somewhat unexpected sometimes. I kind of wonder if that influenced its fuel consumption. Its official ratings are 13.8 liters per 100 kilometer in the city and 10.2 on the highway. But we're seeing on the trip computer here over 15 liters per 100 kilometers, and that's almost 1,000 kilometers of various drivers having driven this. So that's significantly high, and it kind of makes you wonder what's going on. I mean, it could just be it's a big vehicle with a lot of weight. How's the Ascent doing as far as its fuel consumption?
Well, the NRCan ratings for this are a fair bit lower, 11.6 liters per 100 kilometers in city driving and 9.0 on the highway. The trip computer is showing 12.0 liters per 100 kilometers over 420 kilometers. Again, not all us, but certainly a lower across the board average, it looks like.
One of the other aspects about this being a slightly larger vehicle than the Ascent is it kind of drives very large. It drives like a full-size SUV or something like that, mainly because of this large, flat hood that we've got here that you're looking over. So it almost seems like you're looking over a pickup truck hood when this is really just a mid-size SUV. And the fact is, it's also got a slightly larger turning radius than the Ascent, making it a little bit trickier to park in tight parking lots like a mall or underground parking at a condo. So it's something to watch out for if you're looking for this vehicle and live where parking is scarce. You might need to think about it and check out how you feel about parking this thing.
Yeah, and on the other hand, the Ascent is a lot more maneuverable in sort of suburban environments where people are more likely to drive this sort of vehicle. But I'm not sure that the handling is quite as nice. It does have a softer suspension, a little bit easier going over some of the rougher roads. It drives a little bit more car-like overall, I would say, than the Atlas does. If I was, as a suburban parent, choosing between these two vehicles in terms of one that's easier to get around in a city environment, the Ascent is the one that I'd be going for. On safety and convenience features, the Ascent is no slouch either. We've got the EyeSight suite of technologies, which gives you adaptive cruise control, lane centering, collision avoidance, all that good stuff that people are looking for these days, and also a very high IHS safety rating. And so if it's safety that you're looking for, then this is a very good bet.
The Atlas does doesn't achieve that rating, but it might just be because the IHS hasn't got around to testing its forward collision avoidance systems, which is, without those, it can't achieve those highest ratings. But it still has good crash worthiness in pretty much all of the categories, so it should still be a safe vehicle for your family in the event of an accident. What it is for sure is spacious and practical. It's got very impressive cargo space with well over 583 liters of trunk space behind the third row alone. And with all the seats down, it goes all the way up to 2,741 liters. What's good about it is that the cargo area is also nice and wide. And we noticed when we did our cargo test that the golf clubs had plenty of space to get in there because there was some extra width at the back of the cargo area that the Ascent did not have.
No, that's a good point. I mean, the Ascent is a smaller vehicle overall than the Atlas, and that does result in lower cargo numbers. We're looking at 2,435 liters with all the seats dropped, and 498 liters behind the third row. That being said, it does fit our jogging stroller upright and let the hatch get closed, and so it's not completely impractical for families. It still meets a lot of those uses, although it is worth noting that some people like their cargo floor to be really flat with all of the seats dropped, and the Ascent doesn't achieve that. It does maintain some angle on those second row seats when they're flat.
Because the Atlas is a higher trim, then clearly it's going to have a few advantages. And it does have the top-of-the-line infotainment system, but I actually had some issues with it where at times it was slow to respond to my touch, and at other times there were conflicts between the radio and Apple CarPlay, where I wanted to use my navigation on CarPlay, but I wanted to still listen to the radio. But for some reason, it kept switching the radio off and going back to my Apple CarPlay, which I find kind of frustrating in a system that's brand new and should be better at handling that. The other nice piece of technology up front here is that it's got a fully digital gauge cluster, which means it looks fantastic. You've got all the information you need right in front of you, and it's got various different menus you can use to keep track of your fuel consumption or the driver aids. So everything looks really great, but there's a couple of glitches here in the infotainment systems that I wish Volkswagen would resolve.
Well, those points are fair, but I wouldn't say that the Ascent's infotainment system is a whole lot better. It's certainly not quite as pretty, maybe equally as functional, a little bit less glitchy, but I have to say it drives me crazy that when I adjust the volume on this system, it takes over the entire screen for a couple of seconds and I can't go and adjust anything else until it figures out that I've stopped changing the volume control. So that's something I would hope to see Subaru update in a future version of this system. On the other hand, there are features that are simply not available on the Ascent at all that a lot of people would be looking for, like a wireless charging pad, that digital gauge cluster. Maybe that one's more of a nicety, but there's no head-up display available on the Ascent either, even in the top trims. And so those are things that I'm sure Subaru would want to add to the feature lineup at some stage. We're not comparing apples to apples here in terms of these trim levels, and if you want to pay for the upgrades on the Ascent, you can get things like wood grain inserts and that sort of thing. But to be truthful, the interior that you get here at the limited level is quite good for the price.
Considering it wasn't the top trim, the Ascent's interior really impressed me, especially those little patches of light cream colored leather on the dash and the door panels that kind of broke up the monotony of the dark interior. And in the Atlas, it really just only even gets better. It's like the Atlas has got a nice brown, sort of chocolatey leather interior, and it feels great. And it's also got a steering wheel that's wrapped in leather, and it's got perforated leather at the side, with really well-positioned steering wheel controls that your thumbs can easily reach. So I really like the good job that Volkswagen does with its steering wheels, and it is an interior that impresses even though you know it costs $55,000. Well, I think we've got a real feel for these vehicles, and I know which one I would pick ultimately. How about you, Steph?
Yeah, I've got my pick figured out as well. Let's head back and chat it out.
Okay, all right. See you at the parking lot. Well, I think we saw that they're both still pretty relevant in this segment, even with all the newcomers. The Atlas, they definitely got the size right, but it comes with both good and bad size. It's got plenty of space. The third row is really usable, tons of cargo space, but it also drives really big, so it feels awkward, and it's like even a size up from what it is. I think they should go for a little bit more comfort in this segment.
I have to agree, and I'd say the Ascent covers off those comfort aspects while still being drivable and usable in city driving, whereas this, as you said, has a bit of a bigger, heftier feel on the road. Plus, this has a lot of family-friendly features and arrangements inside. Really good visibility with those low shoulders, great big windows, and infotainment that's not beautiful but usable, and that's the most important thing. So I think we're settling on the Ascent for this one.
Absolutely. It was very simple, livable, and practical, and delivered everything I feel like I really needed in a three-row crossover, and did it while driving quite nicely and very, very comfortably.
For Driving.ca, I'm Stephanie Walcraft.
And I'm Jonathan Yarconi. For more crossover news and reviews, go to Driving.ca and hit the bell to subscribe to our YouTube channel.